My husband brought his work wife on our anniversary trip, so I let her have him and his career. The boarding gate for our flight to the Maldives was crowded, but I spotted Mark immediately. He was standing by a pillar, grinning at his phone, looking more excited than I'd seen him in years. I figured he was just happy about our 10-year anniversary. We needed this. The last year had been a blur of late nights at his firm and his constant talk about his work wife, a junior associate named Elena who apparently kept his life together better than I ever could. I approached him, ready to pull him into a hug, when I saw the two oversized, rose-gold suitcases parked next to him. Then, Elena stepped out from behind the pillar, wearing a sundress that cost more than my car payment and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mark didn't even look guilty. He just gestured toward her and said, "Surprise. I knew you wouldn't mind." Elena's had such a brutal month with that breakup, and since we already had the villa, it seemed cruel to let her sit at home alone. Elena reached out and squeezed my arm like we were childhood friends, telling me how lucky I was to have such a generous man who would use my frequent flyer miles to upgrade her to first class so she could truly decompress. I stood there, my boarding pass trembling in my hand, as Mark explained the seating. He had the middle, Elena had the window, and I was relegated to the aisle. Mark whispered in my ear that I shouldn't be weird because I usually sleep through flights anyway, so what did it matter? The entire 13-hour journey was a preview of the hell that awaited me. I watched through the gap in the seats as Elena rested her head on his shoulder, and Mark fed her pieces of his gourmet meal while I picked at a tray of cold pasta. Every time I tried to speak, Mark would give me a look that suggested I was being an embarrassment. He told me this was modern corporate culture and that if I were more successful, I'd understand the bond between partners who grind together. When we reached the resort, the nightmare solidified. The hostess at the overwater bungalow greeted us with a nervous smile, noting that Mark had called weeks ago to change the reservation from a romantic package to a group retreat. I watched as Mark led the way into our suite. It was beautiful, but there was only one king-sized bed. In the corner, a small, stiff daybed had been made up with a single sheet. Mark didn't even hesitate. He told me the daybed would be perfect for me since I have a bad back and need a firm surface, while he and Elena would share the king bed to discuss the Q3 filings before they went to sleep. I felt the air leave my lungs. I told him absolutely not. I told him this was our anniversary. Mark just sighed, that condescending, heavy sigh he used when he wanted me to feel small. He told me my middle school jealousy was exhausting and that I was lucky he was transparent about his friendships instead of hiding them like other men. That evening, at what was supposed to be our anniversary dinner, Mark ordered a 3-course tasting menu for himself and Elena, while telling the waiter I'd just have a salad because I'd been complaining about my weight. They spent the entire night laughing about office jokes, their legs brushing under the table. When the bill came, Mark didn't even look at it. He swiped his corporate gold card with a flourish. Elena looked at me and said, "You really should be more grateful, Sarah. Most wives would kill for a husband who brings them to places like this, even if they aren't the center of attention." I didn't say a word. I just watched them. I was no longer the sad wife, I was a witness gathering evidence. The breaking point came 2 days later. Mark booked a couple's massage at the world-class spa. When I showed up, the receptionist told me Mark had already gone back with his partner. I walked into the treatment room to find Mark and Elena face down on side-by-side tables, holding hands across the gap while soft music played. Mark didn't even open his eyes when I walked in. He just muttered, "Go get a drink at the bar, Sarah. You're ruining the vibe." I walked out, but I didn't go to the bar. I went back to the room and started looking through Mark's laptop, which had left unlocked. I found the expense reports. He hadn't just used my miles, had been billing Elena's clothes, her jewelry, and even this entire anniversary trip to the firm under client development. He was embezzling to fund his mistress lifestyle. That night, the final blow landed. I pretended to be asleep on that miserable daybed. Around 1 a.m., I heard the whispering. I opened my eyes just a crack and saw Mark and Elena tangled together on the king bed. Mark was whispering to her that he was going to leave me after the next bonus cycle, that I was dead weight and he only kept me around because I handled the household chores. Elena giggled, her hand tracing the line of his jaw, and said, "Just make sure the divorce settlement doesn't cut into our travel fund." I waited until their breathing synced into the heavy rhythm of sleep. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs, and took my phone. I took photos. Clear, high-resolution photos of them in each other's arms in our anniversary bed. I took photos of the corporate card sitting on the nightstand next to Elena's expensive lingerie. I didn't pack. I just grabbed my passport and my purse. I walked to the resort dock and paid a boat captain $500 in cash to take me to the main island immediately. I booked a flight home using the emergency credit card my father had given me years ago, the one Mark didn't know about. As the plane took off, the sun was rising over the Indian Ocean, and I felt a cold, sharp clarity I'd never known. I blocked Mark's number. I blocked Elena. I spent the entire flight drafting an email and compiling a folder of every receipt, every photo, and every logged hour of their business meetings. On Monday morning, I didn't go home. I went to a hotel, met with the most aggressive divorce attorney in the city, and then I went to Mark's office. I knew the C-suite executives were holding their quarterly strategy meeting. I walked past the receptionist, who knew me well enough not to stop me, and pushed open the heavy oak doors of the boardroom. The room went silent. Mark was sitting at the long table, looking tired but smug, leaning toward Elena who was sitting right next to him. Mark jumped up, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. "Sarah? What are you doing here?" "We need to talk privately." I didn't look at him. I looked at the CEO. I told the room, "I'm sorry to interrupt the strategy session, but I thought you'd want to see the client development Mark has been working on." I opened my laptop and projected my screen onto the massive wall monitor. The first image was the photo of Mark and Elena in bed. The second was the receipt for the first-class tickets bought on the company card. The third was the itemized list of spa treatments and jewelry. The silence was deafening. Elena started to cry, a high, thin sound, while Mark just stared at the screen, his mouth hanging open. I handed Mark the divorce papers, which my lawyer had rushed through that morning. I told him, "Everything goes through my attorney now. Don't bother coming home, the locks are already changed." The CEO stood up, his face a deep, pulsing purple. He didn't even look at me. He looked at Mark and Elena and said one word, "Out." I walked out of that building feeling lighter than I had in a decade. I was halfway to my car when I heard Mark screaming my name. He caught up to me in the parking garage, his tie undone, looking frantic. He tried to grab my shoulders, but I stepped back. He used that reasonable voice, the one he used to gaslight me for years. He said, "Sarah, baby, you've destroyed my life. You've been fired. They're talking about a forensic audit. They might press charges. You have to tell them you made it up. We can fix this. I love you." I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see the man I'd married. I saw a small, pathetic thief who thought he could use me as a footstool while he climbed a ladder made of lies. I told him, "You told me every successful man has a work wife, Mark. Well, I hope she's worth it, because she's the only thing you have left. And from what I heard on the trip, she's only in it for the travel fund, which is currently empty." I got into my car and locked the doors. He pounded on the window, begging, crying, telling me I was being cruel. I just started the engine and drove away, watching him get smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror until he disappeared entirely. I went straight to my lawyer's office. Sarah, my attorney, was waiting with a fresh pot of coffee and a stack of folders. She told me that because of the nature of the infidelity and the financial irregularities Mark had committed, the house and the majority of the savings were likely mine. She asked me how I was feeling. I sat down, took a sip of the coffee, and realized that for the first time in years, my back didn't hurt at all. I told her I was ready to start the next chapter, and this time, the only partner I'd be traveling with would be myself. Mark tried to call me from different numbers for weeks. He sent emails begging for a second chance, claiming Elena had abandoned him the moment the HR investigation started. Apparently, she'd tried to claim he'd pressured her into the affair, but the receipts and the photos told a different story. They were both blacklisted from the industry. I didn't reply to a single message. I sold the house, kept the furniture I liked, and used the settlement to buy a small cottage by the coast. A year later, I was sitting on my own porch, watching the sunset, when I got a notification on my phone. It was an anniversary reminder from a photo app. It showed a picture of me from 2 years ago, looking tired and faded next to a beaming Mark. I deleted the photo. I looked out at the ocean and smiled. I didn't need a work wife or a husband who treated me like an option. I had my life back, and that was the best anniversary gift I could have ever given myself.